Excitement crackled around Devin like static electricity, barely contained by his trembling hands. He practically burst into the dining room, the package clutched tight to his chest. With a thud that echoed in the stillness, he slammed it onto the table. He lunged for the chandelier, flipping the switch and bathing the room in a harsh white light, a spotlight for his prize. His fingers fumbled with the rough twine binding the brown paper, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The cord snapped with a sharp report, slithering to the table like a discarded snake skin. He shoved the paper aside, revealing a sleek, silver box that seemed to hum with an unsettling energy. Each ragged breath rasped in his throat as he sank into a chair. With a deliberate slowness at odds with his racing pulse, he wedged his thumbnail between the box and the lid. The silence in the room was broken only by the soft hiss of the peeling tape as he meticulously severed the seal. Inside, nestled amongst white packing peanuts, lay a simple bill of sale and a single sheet of heavy parchment. Each corner was meticulously folded inward, as if guarding a secret, meeting in the center where a thick circle of dark green wax held them captive. A chillingly detailed scarab beetle was impressed into the seal, its gaze seeming to follow Devin's every move. A cold sweat prickled his skin as he gingerly broke the seal. He unfolded the paper with shaking hands, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. 5 lines of text stared back, each in a different language, a symphony of the unknown. The first resembled an elaborate series of pictures, Egyptian hieroglyphs no doubt. The second was a jumble of swirling lines, possibly Greek. The third held a rigid elegance, Latin for certain. The fourth flowed in graceful curves, adorned with dots and squiggles, Arabic most likely. And the fifth, blocky letters, some with little tails, Hebrew he presumed. Dread settled in his stomach as he realized none of it meant anything to him. He vaguely recalled the dealer's sly grin, and his words echoed in his mind. "There is a warning here, cannot be told." A shiver ran down his spine. What had he gotten himself into? "Yes?" Devin rasped, his voice hoarse with barely contained desire. "Absolutely. I understand." The dealer's grin widened, an unsettling glint in his eyes, before he finally agreed to the sale. Devin barely registered the man's words, his mind already consumed by the wonders within the box. He set the cryptic message aside, a tremor running through his hands that he blamed on nervous anticipation. With reverence, he lifted the prize from its packaging. A dark wooden case, exquisitely crafted, housed a world unlike any he'd ever seen. Crystal clear museum glass offered a window into the meticulously crafted scene within. But the true masterpiece lay beyond the glass. A diorama, a frozen tableau of exquisite horror. 3 magnificent beetles, each a marvel in its own right, perched on intricately positioned branches. Dried grass, meticulously glued to the base, completed the illusion of a forgotten forest floor. Yet, a disquieting tension hung in the air. Beneath the meticulously arranged branches, a hint of movement sent a shiver down Devin's spine. A spider, unlike any he'd ever encountered, lurked in the shadows. Its form, shrouded in darkness, was obscured by the meticulously placed branches, but its grotesquely long legs protruded, defying belief. 8 eyes, obsidian black and gleaming, seemed to pierce the glass, locking directly onto Devin's. Dark gray, almost black, the spider sprawled beneath the branches, its impossibly long legs jutting out at unnatural angles. 8 eyes, like chips of obsidian, gleamed an eerie emerald through the museum glass, catching the light and boring into Devin. A primal shiver snaked down his spine, a tremor that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. $300. The antique dealer in Milford had gouged him, but the memory of that predatory gleam in the spider's eyes overshadowed the financial sting. Devin had known, the moment his gaze fell upon the diorama, that he couldn't leave without it. A smile, strained at the edges, played on his lips as he sat mesmerized. Minutes bled into an eternity, the only sound his own ragged breaths. Finally, with a sigh that held more tension than contentment, he rose. The discarded packaging felt heavy in his arms, a physical manifestation of his impulsive decision. A half-hearted attempt at a Brahms whistle sputtered out as he reached for the recycling bin. The kettle's insistent whine jolted him back to reality. A notification flashed on his phone, his ex-wife's name a stark reminder of his mounting bills. The alimony payment, a nagging thorn in his side, felt heavier than ever. "Tomorrow," he muttered, the word a flimsy promise hanging in the air. He moved through the apartment on autopilot, the shadows cast by the drawn shades seeming to lengthen and twist. The maid's work, usually a source of satisfaction, barely registered. A disquiet, born from the watchful eyes in the diorama, now permeated everything. His collection, once a source of pride, felt different somehow, unsettling even. Had he unleashed something more than just a spider into his meticulously curated world? Other maids simply hadn't understood the delicate balance required. Janet, however, possessed a reverence for his collection that bordered on the uncanny. Perhaps that's why he tolerated her occasional oddities. With a final, lingering pat on the glistening carapace of a particularly rare beetle, Devin concluded his inspection. The kettle's shrill shriek shattered the silence, jolting him back to the mundane. A practiced efficiency guided his movements as he brewed his mint tea. The calming aroma filled the air, a stark contrast to the unsettling energy radiating from the diorama across the room. Delicate tendrils of steam danced above the mug, a fleeting beauty that mirrored the fleeting normalcy of his evening ritual. Yet, his gaze remained fixed on the display. He'd amassed an impressive collection over the years, each piece a testament to his unique taste. But this was different. The golden scarab, its sheen almost insolent in the lamplight, held a hypnotic allure. He understood, with a chilling clarity, the reverence the Egyptians bestowed upon these creatures. Its pose, perfectly balanced on a twisted branch, seemed almost purposeful. A morbid artistry, a testament to the taxidermist's skill, or something more. A prickle of unease crawled up Devin's spine. He couldn't imagine ever tiring of looking at it, but a new, unsettling question arose. Could he ever truly look away? A satisfied sigh escaped Devin's lips as he finished his tea. The warmth traveled down his throat, a fleeting comfort in the unsettling chill that seemed to emanate from the diorama. He rinsed his cup with robotic movements, his mind already consumed by his newest acquisition. He carried the display and the cryptic letter into his study, a sanctuary that now felt strangely oppressive. The gas flames in the fireplace hissed to life, casting flickering shadows across the room. Devin settled into his leather armchair, the worn leather cool and unyielding beneath him. The strange letter lay crumpled in his hand. A silent question hung in the air. Translate it or not? A glance at his laptop mocked him with the promise of answers. With a groan that echoed in the stillness, Devin rose and lumbered towards the computer. He typed the Latin sentence with trembling fingers, the translated words appearing on the screen like a malicious curse. Cursed and bound, the translation read. Touch not the scarab, lest ye be touched. Life from your life, an evil awakened. A frown etched itself onto Devin's face. He reread the sentence, double-checking his typing. No mistake. Curious little warning, he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. The laptop screen seemed to glow with an unnatural light, repelling him. He slammed it shut and retreated back to the armchair, the letter clutched tightly in his hand. He tossed it onto the worn leather, a sudden urge warring with his lingering skepticism. A curse? It had to be nonsense, a ploy by some greedy antique dealer. Yet, the thought of the smooth, golden carapace beneath his fingertips sent a jolt of illicit pleasure through him. He licked his lips, a nervous habit, his gaze fixated on the diorama. The teasing scent, a whisper of something ancient and unknown, still lingered in the air. "Of course, I can touch it," he whispered, a manic edge creeping into his voice. "It's mine." His hand hovered over the display case, a battle raging within him. Desire warred with a flicker of fear, but the allure of the forbidden proved stronger. With trembling fingers, he lifted the lid, a wave of anticipation washing over him. Devon's eyelids fluttered, contemplating a celebratory brandy. But fatigue weighed heavy, and starting liquor before 6 meant no Sherlock on PBS tonight. A glance at the clock confirmed it, almost 6. A short nap, he decided, followed by a light dinner. Sherlock and Watson could wait, and the brandy would taste even better then. He settled back in his chair, unlacing his shoes and wiggling his toes into the plush carpet. A contented smile played on his lips as he thought about the new acquisition. The familiar symphony of nightly noises lulled him, the soft pops of the gas flames, the fridge's gentle hum, a car starting downstairs. Suddenly, a sharp crack shattered the lullaby. Devon jolted upright, the letter tumbling to the floor with a startled gasp. He rubbed his blurry eyes, taking in the room bathed only in firelight. The solitude of his study felt off. With a trembling hand, he reached for the floor lamp and flicked it on. The sudden brightness stung his eyes, and it took a moment to adjust. Everything was sharp now, and his gaze fell upon the source of the sound. The diorama. The front pane of glass lay shattered on the carpet, a jagged piece glinting accusingly under the lamplight. How? Confusion morphed into a cold dread as he picked up the fragment. It was inexplicably warm. A faint, sweet scent filled the air, unfamiliar yet strangely alluring. Panic flared in his chest. He looked at the diorama, his breath catching. Empty. The golden scarab, the centerpiece, was missing. Gone. He spun around, his eyes frantically searching the room, landing on the other displays. Birds, rodents, the black bear head. None stirred. How could the scarab have vanished? Ignoring the logical questions that hammered in his skull, he forced himself to breathe, his heart a frantic drum solo in his chest. Finding it was all that mattered. He knelt before the fireplace, examining the floor around the shattered glass. Logic dictated the scarab should be nearby, but logic had left the building the moment the glass inexplicably broke. After a tense search, a flicker of movement caught his eye. The scarab, clinging precariously to the underside of his chair, one leg twitching against the fabric. He inched forward, eyes glued to the escapee. He reached out, a cold sweat slicking his palms, and gently grasped the insect. Disgust coiled in his stomach as the thing scuttled across his hand, its legs unnervingly warm. An unspoken question formed on his lips. How dash? But it died before it could be spoken. A sharp prick at the back of his neck, a flash of pain, and his world spun. His limbs stiffened, a cold paralysis creeping through him. His thoughts swam, each one a struggle. He lay there, his vision blurred, but still focused on the scarab. It turned, its gaze seeming to meet his in an unsettling way. Then, from the corner of his eye, a movement. A dark blur, 8 impossibly long legs. It was the spider, but this wasn't the same lifeless creature from the diorama. This one moved with a horrifying purpose, carrying a large, pale egg sac. Through the haze clouding his mind, two chilling realizations dawned on Devin. First, the bite. It wasn't the lifeless spider. Second, this wasn't an it. It was a she. The scarab scurried down and joined the spider, depositing the egg sac at her feet. The two creatures stood side by side, an unspoken communication passing between them. Moments later, the other two beetles from the diorama emerged, taking positions near the egg sac. Together, the three beetles rolled it towards Devin. The spider, with a grotesque elegance unlike any ballerina, inched closer. A primal terror gripped him, a desperate urge to flee, but his body refused to obey. He was trapped, and whatever these creatures planned, he was at the center of it. Paralysis gripped Devin, his body a statue locked in a silent scream. The spider, a predator reborn, descended upon him with chilling grace. A single, impossibly long leg brushed his cheek, the sensation amplified by his heightened awareness. He couldn't flinch, couldn't even blink. The scrape of the leg sent shivers down his petrified form. The beetles, their once magnificent forms now grotesque parodies of life, continued their macabre task. The egg sac, an obscene pearl in their midst, rolled unnaturally towards him. The female spider, a weaver of nightmares, spun a web with horrifying efficiency. She anchored a strand beneath his chin, a puppeteer manipulating a lifeless marionette. Her movements, a blur of arachnid fury, became a silkscreen of terror across his face. A silent scream tore at his throat, a prisoner in his own body. He strained against the invisible bonds, the effort a futile dance with despair. Sticky silk, imbued with the strength of his own terror, sealed his eyelids shut. The world dissolved into darkness, punctuated only by the nightmarish symphony of clicks and skitters. The beetles, their forms magnified by the encroaching darkness, became monstrous harbingers of his doom. Their tiny legs, a collective tide of horror, scurried up his neck, their every touch a violation. They pushed the egg sac, a pulsating evil, towards its final destination. With a sickening precision, his jaw was pried open, the beetles shoving their unholy burden between his lips. A final act of monstrous intimacy. The spider, her movements a grotesque dance, spun a silken shroud over his lips, sealing his screams within. Devin lay there, a paralyzed husk, his gaze fixed on the letter, a cruel reminder of his folly. The strange symbols swam before his unseeing eyes, each a mocking echo of the knowledge he desperately craved. Against his numbed flesh, the egg sac pulsed with a life of its own. A horrifying question echoed in the desolate wasteland of his mind. When would they hatch? When would the true horror begin?